All right, so we've learned about subjects and predicates, and we know that there are predicates, and that means that's the verb that the subject's doing in the sentence. But verbs like to do a lot of different things, and when they're doing those different things, those are called verbals. Sorry about the handwriting, you'll be okay. All right, so verbals are words that are derived from verbs or made up from verbs, but they're not forming like the action of a sentence, meaning they're not being predicates anymore. And there are three types of these. They're going to be infinitives, then we have participles, and gerunds. And we'll talk about each of these today. All right, so the first verbal that we're going to talk about is going to be infinitives. So infinitives are really kind of the basic building blocks of verbs. So if you're in a foreign language, you're going to have a head start on this because you know these. So for example, if you're in Spanish, you know correr as to run. And that means you have to plus the verb, and that's exactly what an infinitive is. You have the to plus a verb. And then whatever the verb is, you just kind of insert it right there. Now it's really, really important to remember that in infinitive, because it has this to form here, it can never be the predicate of a sentence. Meaning you're not going to say something like, Jane to run across the street. Like, that's a bad sentence. You would say Jane runs across the street. But you could say Jane runs across the street to meet her friends. And this to meet right here is going to be your infinitive. So think about it as just whenever you have the word to plus a verb, that's going to be your infinitive, as long as it's in this normal verb form, and that's really about as complicated as it is. So the next thing we're going to talk about is gerunds. And gerunds is a funny word, I get it, but it's not that complicated. So gerund, G-E-R-U-N-D. Now, think about gerunds as if verbs were like, I'm tired of being a verb, I want to do something different. It's Halloween, they want to dress up as something new. And verbs decided that they want to be nouns. That doesn't make sense. Let me show you. Okay, so if I said something like, I like pizza, we all recognize that pizza is a noun, correct? But what if I just change this word to something like jumping? So if we can exchange it for a noun, then this verb here, because we all know jumping is an action, then jumping is like literally being an action and working as a noun here. I'll show you again. Let's say school is fun. So it is, okay? Listen. All right. So school is fun. We all know that school is a noun. It's a place, right? Person, place, or thing. But I can also change this to working out is fun. And working out is an action, right? But here, it's actually the subject of a sentence because you have your subject here and you have your verb here. Notice something really interesting about gerunds. We have an ing here, we have an ing here. So gerunds, the kind of rule with them is they function as nouns, meaning they can be the subject of a sentence, they can be the object of a sentence, they can kind of just fill in. So they function as nouns, and they always end in ing. And that's a gerund. All right, so just like verbs like to dress up like nouns on Halloween and become, gerunds, verbs also like to pretend to be adjectives because they're verbs, they can do what they want. And when verbs are pretending to become adjectives, they are become, I'll use the black side, participles. Now, participles are more difficult than gerunds to understand, but just bear with me, I got you. So, participles are verbs acting like adjectives. So think of it like this. Instead of saying the pretty girl performed, what's a good song? What's a good song? I don't know. Truth Hurts. I love some Lizzo. So, instead of saying the pretty girl performed Truth Hurts, we know pretty is an adjective, right? It's a descriptive word that modifies a noun. Instead, we could say, the singing girl. Ooh, that's an ugly G. Okay. So, to sing is an infinitive. We know sing is a verb. It's an action. It's something we can do. But when it's describing someone, that means that it's an adjective. Make sense? Now, notice just like gerunds that this particular one ends in ing. So present participles are always going to end in ing too. There's past tense, but we'll get to those. Let's do one more present tense. So let's say we had a dog. So you could say something like the brown dog scares the mailman. Bad dog. But if you didn't want to describe the dog with brown, which we all know is a color that describes a dog, so it's an adjective, you could say instead something like the barking dog scares the mailman. So the action that this dog is doing, roof roof barking, is going to be what describes the dog and what sets him apart. The action that this girl is doing, I don't do that well, but singing describes her. So these words that were originally verbs are now becoming adjectives, and in that case, they're called participles. Okay, so just like we have present participles that describe what someone's actually doing, sometimes you want to describe something that's already happened. So we call these past participles. Now, just like, our regular present tense participles, these are still going to function as adjectives, meaning they're still describing something. It's just describing something that's already happened. So if you said something like the red car sits in the driveway, instead of saying red car to describe the car, you could say the wrecked car sits in the driveway. So wrecked meaning, dang, it was an accident. So wrecked is describing the car, but it comes from the verb wreck. Make sense? Let's try another car version. So we could say the fast car speeds down the highway. And instead of saying fast, we could say the stolen car. And remember, this is a verbal, so it comes from a verb, and because it's a participle, it's functioning as an adjective. So stolen comes from the word steal, which is a verb, and it's describing the car. So what kind of car is this? It's a stolen car. Now, notice gerunds end in ing, present participles end in ing, but past participles can end in D or in or T. And a lot of times, sometimes that will look like ED or EN. So some other words you could say would be like the bent pole. And this one ends in a T, and it comes from to bend. You could say the blessed food. And blessed comes from to bless. You could say stolen car, wrecked would be there. You could also say like the poked bear, which I don't recommend. You should not poke bears. And that comes from poke. So past participles, you can see wreck, stolen, which comes from steal. You have bent, which comes from bend. Blessed, which comes from bless. Poked, which comes from poke. But all of these are functioning as adjectives to describe something, and all of these things have already happened, which makes it past tense.